We are back, SageCity Podcast number 9. It's been a while since we've done one of these, so we're very rusty. And right now we actually have some other circumstances affecting perhaps the quality of recording. Tom and Adam find themselves to be in Edinburgh in their homes, and I in Glasgow in my home. Google Hangouts is not the best, but it's free, everyone. And talking about Google Hangouts and being at home, this is not unique to most people that find themselves in Scotland, in the UK, in Europe, everywhere in the world really where there's lockdown procedures. Sweden is not suffering what we are suffering just yet. Hopefully they will not have to, but that's a whole different conversation. Yeah, so we would like to talk about remote working today. We just give you a little bit of background. We have been working remotely since the inception of the company, and more so as of a year ago, we've trialed some systems and iterated upon them. So it can be said that we do have some solid experience on what it means to work remotely. Tom, Adam, how are we feeling about remote working, or taking it a level higher than what we've been doing before?
Yeah, well, I think for me it's going pretty well. You know, as you kind of alluded to in the introduction there, you know, we have always had a working at home element, but maybe not to this kind of degree. Personally, been outside the house a few times this last week or so. So, you know, even when we are working at home, we normally be able to go out and see people, talk to people. But obviously, there's restrictions in place right now. Yeah, I think the only change really is that I'm constantly in my underwear. Do all my phone calls and that. There's no real reason to dress up or not necessarily look presentable, because I always look presentable, but definitely not wear trousers. So
That's great. That's just painted a beautiful image in my head.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Tom, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling all right, actually. No, to be honest, I'm going through a bit of a sad time right now, because although the whole world is now, you know, locked behind doors, working away hard on their new plans and ideas, some of them aren't actually so focused and driven.
Are you struggling with motivation?
Well, I'm really referring to myself here, actually, not others. Yeah, that's
okay.
The truth of the matter. You saw right through me, Adam.
Yeah, I have
so
that
focused
neck.
and driven, what does that mean to you? In what sense does that apply?
Well, I've noticed that there have been days where you just sort of roll out of bed, or in my case, roll off the floor, and begin your day of work. And I'm quite an extroverted person, so it's tricky at times, like keeping the motivation going, because for all I know, you guys behind those screens and monitors could just be AI robots, and in fact, the whole world around me has stopped, and there's just me left in this big bad world that I have discovered or found myself in.
You just start working on SageCity.
Exactly. I'm the only one-man army among AI robots building this company. It's quite a weird sensation. I don't know if you guys have come across that feeling also.
I think for me, motivation-wise, I think I didn't exactly struggle with it, but I did have a few days where I was like, that's all I'm going to do today. For me, it helps if you just define things very rigidly. So normally I do work over the weekends, but the last 2 weekends I've purposely went, right, I'm not doing absolutely anything, because, you know, my environment isn't changing like it would normally. So I do get what you're saying and like feeling to an extent. Obviously I live with my girlfriend, so it's maybe a little bit different for me, because I do see like a a physical face, but yeah, it does still feel a little bit alien, and there is a kind of novelty for it for me as well personally. But
what about you, Desu? Do you feel like you've been abducted by aliens?
At the start, it did feel a bit strange. It did feel like a drag, but I kind of began to do some
press ups.
But I began to do some introspection, and I found that every time that I found that I have a really strong philosophical foundation that does not allow me to feel sad, depressed, anxious, lacking motivation, perhaps lacking a sense of purpose for a long time. So I always go back to my philosophical foundation. I do some introspection too. So what I mean by that is whenever I feel these negative emotions, I seek a brand new sense of purpose, or redefined, or perhaps remind myself of what my purpose is, and I take action, because I find that these negative feelings more often than not come from inaction. And if we're at home every day, there will be long periods where we don't do much, or we don't feel a purpose towards taking action. So that's my immediate go-to solution. But I did go through a few days where I was feeling quite under the weather, but that was because I hadn't given myself those actions that feel purposeful to me. The tasks at hand did not feel energizing. But yeah, I've certainly been sleeping more, and I'm a guy that has always, well, not always, but for the past, say, 5 years or so, perhaps a bit less, has not favoured sleep so much. I hate it because I didn't realise its importance, and I would rather be doing something with my time, but nothing. But sleep is not nothing. Sleep is important. But it feels like in every conversation I've had since lockdown, people state that they have been sleeping more, perhaps having
So
more
how many
naps.
hours did you get in today?
Today, well, I did try to get 8,
Oh,
but I got 9.
9. That's lavish.
Yeah.
Total luxury,
But
that is.
But that's the thing. I've realised that I've been doing that, but because, and that's allowed me to actually, I think that's driven partly because I read about an hour before I go to sleep since lockdown started, and before it was only half an hour, and then I would be snoozing like a baby. But now it's 1 hour. So when I set my alarm for 8 hours ahead, it ends up being 7 or 6, half 6, 6.5 hours. So yeah, I'm not too sure, but it feels like days are going fast because I'm sleeping more, but I don't take naps. Anyway, but another thing that that's helped me overcome these negative spouts, I'd say, was discovering new things and going back again to my values. One of the things I value immensely is learning. So I'm always learning new things. And to engage with those new things, you have to first discover them. And to discover them, you have to actively pursue them. So you have to, perhaps, I'm talking so much here, but perhaps you have to take in more from areas that you wouldn't otherwise search for things before. So, for example, one of the things that I've been learning is 3D graphics, and you think, what's the purpose of that? And for now, it's just a hobby, something that I can pad my skill set with, just another trade that I'm a jack of. But yeah, I think those 3 things are important, recognizing that this is an opportunity to gain sleep and energy and refuel our bodies, repair our bodies, take on new actions and discover new things.
Totally. And on the subject of learning, I mean, we have been remote working for some time now, guys. So what have we learned? What have we learned about remote working? Like what works, what doesn't work?
For me, it's probably about making sure you're very clear and consistent and regularly in touch with each other. I think when we first well, I think when we first kind of done this or had periods of like 3 or 4 days where we wouldn't need to meet up or, well, and what we found was necessarily communicate, that when we did come back together to kind of like sum up like what we'd done and all that, that yeah, it wasn't as perfect as it could have been because we hadn't been in sync or like collaborating over certain things. Yeah, for me, it's definitely making sure you're frequently in touch, and most days, especially now, we're messaging each other pretty frequently. Been calling actually for like 2-3 hours a day, and one thing I would add is like don't make it about like don't just call for the sake of it. Call if you have a purpose, and I think we've definitely had a lot of purpose going forward recently. So yeah, that's been really helpful, and also I think kept some of us a bit more sane than others if we'd just been left in isolation. So yeah.
Yeah, too right. I think your point there, about having a bit of purpose or focus in your work, in your phone calls. I mean, that's absolutely crucial. We've always stayed in sync, or what's helped us stay in sync, sorry, has definitely been, setting goals, being clear about what those goals are. And as you go after goals, it's never going to be, what I've found for sure is that it's never going to be exactly how you expect it. Things don't turn out the way you think they would.
Yeah.
And so that's the nature of it. And along that path, you encounter your challenges, your problems, and you have to overcome those obstacles as you're going towards the goal. And staying in sync during that journey together towards that goal is absolutely crucial in getting there. And it's amazing how much more productivity and also general motivation comes about just from having clear and succinct communication between each other. Because once everyone's in line, they're in sync, and they understand, okay, here's what we're doing, but also here's why we're doing it, then how you go about that becomes very, very much more efficient and effective, particularly when you're remote working. But yeah, Desu, like, you mentioned earlier, having sort of philosophies or a bit of things, purpose that keep you motivated and going. Have you ever found that sometimes you're having thoughts to yourself that maybe not so many others are, and so it's like, how do you actually verify that to be true or not?
Some thoughts that...
So you might be, you mentioned there like learning and then reading before bed every night. How do you actually know that what you're working on or learning is the right thing to be getting on with? If considering now that, is it just off the back of your own self, like, oh, I decide for myself, or do you look to others to find answers around that?
Yeah, it's a very good question that perhaps requires an elaborate answer, but I'll try to be briefer than before. The reading before bed, that's a habit I've had since I was perhaps three years old. I've always done that. I've always gone to bed, read, then stone cold sleeping. And my mum would come into the room and turn the light off for me, or my grandmother or my grandfather would do that. And yeah, that's something that I've always found valuable in my life, and it's an opportunity to relax your brain from the day's happenings, zone out a little as well, stop focusing on the things that worry you the most, and feed your brain with some other content, let's say. And that also helps in a non-scientific way. I'm not backing this up, to lower your brainwave frequency and get you into sound sleep. But over the years, something I've sought inspiration, I've sought motivation from other key people in my life, 100%. Well, mostly people outside my life. So I began by reading biographies and autobiographies, by learning the journey of other people that have gone through a similar story as mine, or perhaps even worse, personal history or professional history, and learn about how they overcome those situations. And that's very important, because we cannot rely solely on, in my beliefs, we cannot rely solely on people in our circle of family or friendships, because for a variety of reasons, but at one point you will have experienced, or you will feel like you have experienced more of life than your parents have, and you cannot rely on them to make wise, to give you wise advice or recommendations, and you have to find that advice and recommendations elsewhere. So let's see if I can answer that question. It's important to define your values and what principles you're going to guide yourself through life with. But those things, it's important that those things come from within you. But there's a strong pull and push from influences in your life. So it's important that you actively seek those influences that will contribute the most to your life positively. So read the work of the greats, watch interviews from the most successful people out there, listen to podcasts from people who are in a similar position as you, learn from them, absorb these things. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think like where I was going at on the question, and probably I wasn't too clear on it, was, okay, here we are, remote working between these four walls by ourselves, and there has to be a certain level of self-discipline, but also you don't have self-doubt in just what you're thinking and getting yourself like involved with. And I think this is actually, to be honest, the underlying thinking that's behind this question for me is, given that I am just by myself and that I'm extroverted, I need other people to give me a proxy on, Tom, are you thinking normal or okay, or are you just going a little bit whack and mad here? And having other people around you gives you that proxy of whether you're going a little bit insane or not. I think I can get that proxy through video screens to a certain extent, but there will be a limit. Where I'm going with that is, we all have this in our own lives, is, do we doubt our own decisions or choices that are very much aligned with our own self and our own experiences, our own path forward? You mentioned there, Decio, okay, a lot of the time we're going to rely on our family or friends, work colleagues to try and help us come to better conclusions. But sometimes we just got to go, do you know what, who cares? I'm just going to go ahead with what I think's right.
Yeah, most of the time. Yeah.
In a sense, you're being contrarian to your own immediate circle, yet you're aligning with a different circle that's out there who aren't in your immediate vicinity.
Yeah, I mean...
And so you start to look insane relative to those people.
Yeah, 100%. And in a way, that's a very good thing. Seeking advice and recommendations indirectly is important from people who don't know the circumstances in your life, because they will more likely be non-biased and not have a personal interest in the outcome of your life. So parents will advise you to do things that they see as right in their mind. But if you seek advice from Friedrich Nietzsche, he's been dead a long time ago, but many of the lessons that he's left behind can be applied in your life. While you're feeling alone, you don't, or not feeling alone, but while you're physically alone, it's important to exercise a sense of self. So without needing to consult others for your well-being, you should be able to sit down, reflect, and ask your own self, what am I thinking about? Are these good thoughts? What are these feelings? Am I doing stuff that fuels me? Am I taking on tasks that are purposeful and align with my vision or my ambition, my values? And you should be able to have that conversation on your own.
Yeah. I think remote working is, in a sense, in between. So if you have your immediate circle, so people that you have human contact with, this can be family, friends, work colleagues. And then you have vicarious learning, which is through books, YouTube, whatever other content that you might be consuming, videos online. And then remote working, it kind of lies in between that, because I'm learning, in a sense, vicariously from you guys through these screens and monitors. I'm interacting with what I believe to be some sort of human on the other end. And that is giving me a proxy on, am I making the right choices? Where should I go? What should I do? And so, but at the end, I am here alone in the house. It's just me, right? So I have to then, at the end of the day, I'm the one who's making the choice, and I'm the most immediate proxy to myself in making these decisions. And it's the same for you guys where you are. So I think there's a lot to be said. If you can learn vicariously, you can remote work.
That's a good principle. Yeah, but I also think this is this. You can extrapolate this even further and perhaps be existential in your thinking. This is an accurate representation of life. You know, you go through it alone. You are you. You are in this body. You know, you are independent. And any action must be driven from within you. Any decisions that you make must be driven from within you.
See, I take a totally different tack to that one, because
go for it.
For me, it's like, okay, you ask the question, who am I? And you go, well, okay, you take the sensory perception of sight, for example. You know, right now I'm sat here in the room and I can see color blue, silver, white, black, green outside. All of those colors are, those images or sights are coming from outside of me, but they are being imagined or brought into being inside of me. I am that color, in a sense. I invented the image of green that I'm seeing on the retina of my eyes. So where I'm going with that is the sense of I is actually far more inclusive than you might realize. And when you begin to act with that belief in mind, you see that the world around you is there's more relationship and harmony and togetherness, and actually less of I'm alone.
Yeah, it's a paradox.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, Adam, what do you reckon? Do you think we're all just these self-isolating robots, or that have no interaction with the outside world, or actually are we quite connected?
For me, yeah, I think I have to probably go on, like, weigh in a bit more on Tom's side of things. We're definitely all connected, you know.
I mean, I think the virus is a clear example of that. One person catches it across the other end of the globe, and here we are, stuck inside.
Well, yeah, in that kind of sense, yeah, we're definitely connected. But I'd maybe almost take the stance that in some cases we're a bit too connected. You know, like the fact that some people feel, a lot of people are feeling pretty isolated right now. This is maybe similar to some of the kind of stance that Des was taking, in the sense that you should be comfortable in yourself, and you should be able to talk to yourself one-on-one. You should be able to, well, maybe this is probably more my opinion, but you should be able to spend like an eternity on your own. I don't think it's the best, I don't think that'd be the best quality of life or anything, but you know, you should be able to deal with everything on your own, or at the very least people should strive to. And the kind of interconnectivity that we've all got these days is great, because it does strengthen us. It does help us become better people. It helps us understand different viewpoints and things like that. But when that's kind of taken away, like it is for a lot of people right now, I think a lot of people may realize like that they're not much without that, and everyone should be something without that, regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. there's a strong feeling of dependence on what we had. And perhaps this goes back to, we should exercise a feeling of independence, self-reliance. And this goes back to Tom's point on remote work, where you will do well working remotely if you are capable of exercising a feeling of independence and self-reliance. I think it's also important not to attach ourselves to things or ways of being, ways of living, and realizing that overnight those things can be taken away from us, and we need to find a way, develop a way to deal without or with the absence of that particular thing, that activity, that individual, that job, that car, that girlfriend, that father, that mother. You need to be able to figure out how to go through life in a way that you're resilient and self-reliant. That comes from my own personal experience, that's the thing that's helped me overcome negative parts in my life. So that's worked well for me. It may not work well for everyone.
Yeah. It's definitely like a balance of the two. Like, you should be able to go out and be part of something great with other people, but also when you come home at night or whatever, you should be comfortable and satisfied with yourself that you are something of value, and you know what you are, and you have certain things you like doing, and just can appreciate yourself still.
Totally. I think part of the being able to become that self-reliant, independent person is kind of what Decio brought up at the beginning there, the principles or philosophy that you sort of live by in your own self. And I think sometimes I've been very explicit about what those things are, and other times I've been kind of implicit, not quite totally aware, like my motivations behind a certain action or thought. And so getting clear about why you do things, that those principles are really, really important when you're trying to develop a self-reliance and more independence. And part of that also is considering your dependencies and where they kind of come from and how stable those dependencies are. One example can be, if I depend, let's say, on others for validation, then you're almost destined to have a very volatile set of feelings around that subject, because people's opinions about you change all the time. And so should you really depend on that for your own self-confidence or decision making, all that sort of thing. So questioning where your dependence comes from, your self-reliance comes from, is very, very important in deciding what are the right sets of philosophies, rules, principles, rules of thumb, that you can live by. And I think also it goes beyond just the intellectual side. It's a feeling as well. You can't miss out the feeling part. If you just have the intellect, you're using chisel and hammer when you could be using a drill. So, which is a terrible analogy for that one. But what I'm saying is it's caveman versus tech man. So with that, where I'm going at with this is, okay, we are as teams, as a team, we set ourselves up to remote work. Part of that was self-reliance, and part of that was having clear rules and philosophies for how we lead our own individual lives. And I actually think that is so important to setting up your remote working team. It's having a set of people who have very clear values and beliefs that they live by for themselves, and that those beliefs actually are strong enough and explicit enough that we can talk openly about them, we are aware about them with each other, and that we can also get in sync with them with each other. And it's simple things like between us three, where we believe in hard work, right? Put in the hours. Reward doesn't come from just sitting about. Something as simple as that mindset bleeds into our remote working. It means that we don't have to look over each other's shoulders all the time to see if that person's doing their work. That's so important when you're remote working. And that comes back to a fundamental belief around ambition, hard work. You got to put the hours in to make it happen. So once you've understood that people live by certain sets of beliefs in their thinking, and that actually translates to their actions, this then dictates how well your remote working is going to work, or how successful your remote working will be. The more aligned your cultural values are, the more the people live them out in action, and the more they kind of support you in being able to have your own independent, ways of thinking, but also being able to come together and stay in sync with one another. That's all super important to leading successful remote work.
Mm-hmm. So, going forward with, where the world's at right now, everyone's indoors, everyone's doing their jobs pretty much indoors apart from essential workers. Where do you see the future of this going? I think, well, what we've talked about here so far is that really it's down to an individual, and they have to believe in what they're doing in order to be just as productive, if not more productive, at home when they're not with people, basically. So do you think people are going to instantly want to jump back to going to an office 9 to 5? Or do you think that more and more people are going to become a hybrid model, or just keep like this indefinitely forever?
Totally. Well, I'd be surprised if nobody was questioning whether they could continue doing their remote working in some format, even after everyone has gone back to working in the central offices again.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? My friend who works for the government, he said to me, "Yeah, I pretty much am able to get just as much done, if not more, since being at home." Mm-hmm. And so, those are the kinds of things that are going to crop up going forward. Yeah, I reckon for the vast majority of jobs, this may not be possible. For some of the jobs, maybe even 2 days out of your 5-day work week would be remote working. Consider all of the time saved in traffic jams. Consider how, you can spend that time at home. Yeah, just not having to worry about being at the office and, well, I guess doing what we do, which is sitting about in your jammies or, rolling out of bed, making a cup of tea and getting on with it. So, but yeah, what do you reckon, Desu? What do you see kind of happening going on in the future? Do you think people will question whether they can continue remote working or not?
I think a simple way to categorizing this is by the type of company that you're working for, or the type of company that you're leading. So if you simply compare a startup with a corporate, they will have different views. I mean, things like factors like scaling. How do we scale this? Another thing is flexibility. For remote working to be successful, you have to be open about each other's personal schedules. Like, I need to understand that, for example, Adam, he prefers to work 4 hours of deep concentration work, and then he likes to go and play Xbox for an hour to zone out.
Hey.
And then
no, that's not true. I like doing.
It's an arbitrary example.
Oh no, but for an accurate example, I like doing like 4 or 5 hours of like social calls and stuff, and then doing like another 4 or 5 hours of like in-depth work most days, and then playing Xbox.
Yeah. That's just an example. For example, for me, I love waking up, exercising, meditating, exercising, perhaps reading, and then get on with my work, deep work, 4 hours, break, 4 hours, whatever it may be. Tom's different as well. But let's say there's a John in our team, and John he's a single parent. He's got 2 kids. We need to understand what his schedule is. We need to understand that John may not be available on call at 9 o'clock every morning. He may be available only between 12 and 2, because at 9 o'clock he has to get his children to school, and so on and so forth. And when he comes back, he's got to take them to the grand's house or to football or wherever it may be. We need to be more open about our own personal schedules and not have as much taboo. Not having too much of a boundary between personal and professional. I understand some people enjoy that, but for remote working to be successful, you need to understand what each other is up to on a routine basis. Not specifically, but just have an understanding where people will be and when. Their preferred measure of work. If they like to work an hour and then have a break, Pomodoro style. Or they prefer to go 4 hours deep, no distractions, I'm not available for calls. Or, yeah guys, my inbox is open all the time. We need to understand each other on these levels.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think there was one point, my schedule used to be very, very much kind of night owl mode. So I would get up at, 11, 12 o'clock and go on till about 4 a.m. This was for like quite a good while during SageCity. I think 6 months at least, or 8 months. And I remember like getting up in the mornings and you guys had already like rabbited through a whole bunch of like stuff on Trello and Google Docs. So I just kind of get up, open my phone, scroll through all the comments and like notifications, do my answers and all that. And then usually I do my sort of deep work from about 12 o'clock at night till 4 a.m. when you guys were all not online, annoying me. So like that worked really well for me. So in recent times of like getting up earlier, not super early, but a lot earlier than I used to. And again, like, that's just kind of what's worked for me in terms of getting the juices in my brain going. And yeah, so that's one of the massive advantages there in remote working, is that your schedule can be flexible, and as long as people are open and understanding. Obviously, you got to show up for your meetings, and some things in the team, if there are routines, have to, there's got to be a time for it. But other than that, like, as long as you get the job done, it doesn't matter when you do it, in my view.
Yeah. And that will affect how performance is measured too. We need to evolve from the way things are or have been done up until now,
Too right.
You can't really track someone's office hours.
Totally.
But I do, to wrap it up, I do think that you're right. The traffic jams, the commute time, eliminating those things has opened up opportunity for family time or personal development, reading things that you wouldn't otherwise have read, or learning skills that you would otherwise not have learned. And it's down to each one of us to, again, have that self-discipline, have that self-reliance, have those conversations with ourselves to define exactly what those new things will be, and dedicating our newfound time to pursuing those avenues.
Too right.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Do we want to wrap it up there, or?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to run it off. I think we've been going 40 minutes, so congrats if you made it this far.
Following podcast episodes that we aim to record will touch on things like we've talked about today, like values and principles. But we'll also engage in particular topics of interest that each of us has. For example, the future of markets and economy, how the current state of affairs will affect our future, or what does innovation mean going forward? Some changes in the political landscape, for example, or how Scotland should respond. And of course, we'll talk a lot about blockchain technology and emerging technologies. And yeah, we hope to have you join us on that journey as we discuss these topics that we're incredibly passionate about. Any final words, Tom, Adam?
I'll just throw you a little beatbox number on harmonica before we do a round trip on this podcast.